For this first video, I'm going to talk about a book which emerged during the boom in spy fiction during the 60s. There was a lot of different types of spy fiction being written, really following in the footsteps of James Bond, the Ian Fleming novels. And these featured spies who were pilots, they were actors, doctors, adventurers, playboys, and in some cases even government intelligence officers. A lot of them were, to be frank, rubbish, but quite a few of them have stood the test of time, and later in this series I'll be talking about some of my other favourites. But the one I want to talk about now is the one that really broke the mould, because the main character is a female, Modesty Blaise, written by Peter O'Donnell. And Modesty's background was that after World War II she'd been a child refugee and wandered around the Middle East and Europe and the Balkans, gathering languages and fighting tooth and claw to survive. She then made her way to Tangier, where she eventually became involved in a criminal enterprise and took it over and started what was called the Network, a big criminal gang. She retired from that and started living in London. And the plot of the book has her being coerced really into working for British intelligence, or persuade is probably a better word. One of the things about the spy stories at the time was some of them featured something in the way of unarmed combat, and I was very interested in it because at the time I was not long started karate and done judo earlier, and I found that of interest. Most of the books, if they did mention unarmed combat, it was usually judo, because that was the one that was most publicly well known. Karate was really quite a new thing. The place I was training was it was the only place in the area that you could train at, and there was only a handful of clubs in the whole country. So it was very, very rare. The great thing about the Modesty Blaise books is that she rarely, or the author rarely, introduces a lot of very, very high-level martial arts expertise into them. Modesty is assisted in her endeavours by her wingman or sidekick, Willie Garvin, who is a very big ex-Foreign Legion expert, who his background is described in the book as Thai style, what we now call Muay Thai. But as he says, I don't go a bundle on any one system. He's trained in many, many systems. Peter O'Donnell makes the point that some of the top karate guys went over to Thailand and were soundly beaten by the Thais, which was true. So besides the unarmed combat, there's a lot of weapons mentioned. Firearms, Modesty Blaise is very adept with the pistol. There's a lot of holsters mentioned, ways of carrying, concealed. Willie is the world expert with the throwing knife. He can draw and throw his knives faster than people can draw a pistol. He's also a collector and an enthusiast with a whole range of arcane weapons. The Japanese jute is mentioned, which I'd never heard of when I first read the book. And he also fashions clandestine weapons for use. Modesty has a tear gas capsule in a lipstick, for example, and he's also made a little hand striking weapon, a Congo, which we might also call a Yawara, which can be disguised as the clasp on a handbag, for example. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff, and it was really a cut above what was really in most of the other books at the time. and the expertise really continued right through the series. In one of the later books, she actually starts using a Star PD-45, which was one of my actual favourite pistols. Peter O'Donnell wrote a number of novels, but Modesty Blaise had actually started as a strip cartoon in the newspapers. And whenever I was down in London, firstly I used to just go for a trip, sightseeing and so on, but later I was working down there on close protection. I would always pick up the Evening Standard and catch up on Modesty and Willie's latest adventures. Like a lot of the books, it was made into a movie, and it was dreadful. It was not only one of the worst spy films, it was one of the worst films. The star was Monica Vitti. She wasn't a particularly good actress, and unfortunately the director was besotted with her, so there was a real lack of direction. Willie was played by Terence Stamp, very good actor. He didn't match the size as written, but his acting skills were there, and he could play a Cockney very, very well. Unfortunately, he chose to use a high-pitched giggle whenever they'd had a fight, and it was really off-putting and incongruous. If they were making the Modesty Blaise movies now, I think someone like Jason Statham would be ideal for the Willie Garvin role. And there has been talk of resurrecting the character in a movie. Quentin Tarantino, for example, was considering doing it. And a fun fact, in Pulp Fiction, Vincent, the John Travolta character, is actually reading Modesty Blaise when he's killed. Modesty lives in a penthouse in London, a Corbusier influenced design, and I actually years later was on the team protecting a Middle Eastern prince who owned that penthouse, so I was up there quite a lot, and it always gave me a quiet laugh inside to think I'm working in Modesty Blaise's penthouse. As I said, we'll be talking about some of the other spy fiction, and I'll no doubt talk about some of the other books in the Modesty Blaise series. But for now, I would strongly recommend you get hold of the first one, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.